Welcome back to a little Terror of Tech. Got horror franchises. Let's see what's on deck. Red Door, Last Key. Man, these demons is hideous. Lock in with your boy, because what we got is Insidious. Now, for the Insidious franchise, there are 5 installments in this series of movies. There's Insidious, Insidious 2, Insidious 3, Insidious The Last Key, and Insidious The Red Door. To go ahead and kick this list off, starting at number 5, we have Insidious The Last Key. Now, just to give a little background on this movie, Elise faces her most fearsome and personal haunting yet, as she is drawn back to her ghostly childhood home where the terror began. This movie largely bases the story around Elise's childhood home. It was really dope to see those flashback scenes with Elise as a child and her brother, the things that she had to grow up with, sort of was discovering her powers of being sort of like a clairvoyant or like being able to see supernatural entities. And it was really cool to see that aspect of her childhood and, seeing how her father was very unwelcoming of her abilities, didn't really want to buy into the fact that there was anything paranormal going on in the home. But overall, just with this movie, it just doesn't. There were a lot of elements that they weren't able to nail. First off, the last key, the little key demon thing with the key fingers, absolutely was not scary. The best part about this movie is the fact that Lin Shaye returned and reprised her role as Elise. Still having Tucker and Specs in this movie was also a plus, but ultimately, just the whole storyline outside of the aspect of Elise's childhood just doesn't really resonate all that well. Not an overly memorable movie, and one that usually when I'm watching the Insidious franchise, I tend to skip. Coming in at number 4, we got Insidious Chapter 3. Essentially, it is a prequel that is set before the haunting of the Lambert family, and it reveals how Elise reluctantly agrees to use her ability to contact the dead in order to help a teenage girl who has been targeted by a dangerous supernatural entity. When this movie first dropped, I was really anticipating it. Thinking about coming off the success of Insidious and Insidious 2, those two back to back, those are two bangers. So when you have an Insidious 3 dropping, you're hoping that can follow the same suit. Now, I don't 100% believe that they accomplished that, but this movie definitely does have some enjoyable scenes, or a lot of the high tension or scary scenes took place in her bedroom. She couldn't walk and she needed a wheelchair to move around everywhere. A lot of the action happens with her being stationary or, just being able to crawl on the ground, and it just, I don't know. It just made the movie really slow burn, really slow paced because there wasn't a whole lot of movement that she could do on her own. Overall, but certainly not a bad entry into this Insidious horror franchise. Coming in at number 3, we have Insidious The Red Door. Now, this movie came out in 2023. It was actually directed by Patrick Wilson, who stars as Josh in the movie. When I went to go see this movie in theaters, I had a really good time. This was a really good way to bring back that original story of the Lambert family and all of the trauma and things that they've had to deal with regarding the further. I thought it was a nice little element seeing how Dalton and Josh are a little estranged from each other. Josh and Renee divorced, so seeing them deal with just, family issues and going throughout the movie trying to not only rebuild the connection with his family, but a large portion of the reason why he's trying to rebuild his connection with the family is because a lot of those memories that were suppressed at the end of chapter 2, Josh has no recollection of it. Him going into the further to save his son, he doesn't even really remember that, and neither does his son, because both of them were made to forget it. I thought that was a really cool angle. I thought Patrick Wilson did a really good job with his first direction of a film. Although they do get to face the little Darth Maul demon from the first one, still, ultimately, I felt like if you're going to bring that demon back, then really make it impactful. It wasn't that great of an ending, but leading up to that, I thought was pretty good. So, very solid entry, and that's why it's coming in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, and I thought about this for a pretty long time just to make sure that I covered all my bases, because these two movies are similar in a way to The Conjuring 1 and The Conjuring 2, a 1A, 1B situation, but once again similar to the Conjuring universe. I had to come in with number 2 as Insidious 2. Insidious 2 is just a complete banger. I felt like they capitalized off all of the success that the first Insidious had. And one thing that I like, typically with sequels, they overly explain the story or why something is why some of the events in the first one happened. But I like the way that they executed it in this film. Just seeing like a lot of those scenes where the scene where it appears that somebody broke in Insidious. So yeah, I mean, there were little scenes like that. I love the element of you being able to see the further even more than you already did, and then having Josh be possessed by Parker Crane, and then finding out the whole background story on that stuff. I thought that was really good. Added a really good element to the movie. So no, Insidious 2 just overall is just an absolute banger. I felt like they executed almost every scene very well. And even though Elise is dead in this movie, she still was able to play some form of a role to help the family out. So now that was pretty cool, and I think it was just overall, like I said, a very good movie. Easily could have been number one, but it's coming in at number two. And coming in at number one, we have Insidious. Part of the reason why Insidious is coming in at number one, although I think 1 and 2 are dang near equal, the biggest leg up that Insidious has is it was so different from any other paranormal or supernatural movie that we had seen before. Like no movie like really dove into like this third dimension, the further, like this movie did. And being completely honest, although I know James Wan had made movies before that like Dead Silence and Saw, but this was my first real introduction into James Wan's film. I thought it had some of the most creative scares in all of horror, especially when it was released. Now, one thing I will say is some of those sounds, like those jump scare sounds that it does anytime some form of action is about to happen on screen, those do get a little old, so those didn't quite age as well. But overall, no, this movie is a banger for sure. And overall, just as a story, no real flaws in it. It was cool. In this movie, obviously, it's the introduction of Elise and Specs and Tugger, which are, a dynamic duo in themselves. So no, just overall, everything about the first Insidious is always a banger. For anybody who's a first-time horror watcher, that's usually a very solid go-to in terms of not only just it being a really scary movie, but with it not being a dreadful type of scary. It's a fun scary for all age groups, in my opinion, and anybody who's interested in watching a good scary movie or is a big fan of horror. Insidious is always going to be the way to go. So there we are, horror gang. We got the Insidious franchise ranked. So we have Insidious The Last Key, Insidious Chapter 3, Insidious The Red Door, Insidious 2, and Insidious. So if you like this video, please comment, like, subscribe. Comment down below your ranking of the Insidious franchise. It's one of the best horror franchises in the genre, and one that I think everybody should watch. But like I said, I appreciate you guys. There's more content on the way. We're on the road to 100 subs. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time. Stay spooky.